Sometimes in life, we go through things that are so extreme, both beautiful and tragic, but so extreme that we can't even talk about it, and that would be fair. But if nobody talks about it, nobody then gets given the language or the safe space to share with each other and the world how things happen the way that they do. This next guest has gone through one of the most extreme circumstances in life, but somehow still finds light enough to shine back onto the experience. Smajo, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me and giving me a chance to speak to you.
How are you doing today?
Good. It's been a hectic day at work. I'm at the university still in an empty lecture hall and trying to get things done and just a lot of reading today, but it's all good.
Um,
I'm glad I can chat to you.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining. I was just saying to my friend, I feel like October's always so busy because everybody knows that December's coming. So you kind of just want to do everything that you can in this essentially one of the final months of the year. So before I ask you what your hope hit is, I just want to quickly explain to our listeners what a hope hit is. So a hope hit is basically a song that brings light back into a body or brings light back into a room. It's a song you listen to feel empowered, to remember your faith in people or in yourself. It's a song that ultimately inspires you to keep putting one foot in front of the other or to celebrate where you are now. So, with that being said, Smayo, what is your hope hit?
Oh, see, I don't know the name of the song,
Okay.
but it's a song that's it's something that I've reflected on for the last 30 years. I've known parts of the words of the song. I've told the story what feels like a million times since I've started sharing my story about 10 years ago. And it's a story that my teacher and classmates sang to me when I first arrived to the UK as a refugee from Bosnia.
Mm.
So I arrived to the UK as part of this incredible resettlement program called the Bosnia Project, which is what I'm actually doing work on and research on at the university now. And this resettlement program was set up in less than 48 hours of the first Bosnian refugees arriving to the UK, which
Wow.
I think is absolutely incredible. It kind of
Wow.
shows what we can do
Yeah.
when there's a will to support refugees in the right way. And my community, I always describe as an invisible community because of the help and the support that we've been given, because it's such a well integrated community. So I left Bosnia on the 19th of June, 1994, and arrived in Newcastle on the 19th of July, 1994, with
Wow.
my siblings and my mum. And we were reunited with my dad, who had arrived as part of the same Bosnia project, the same resettlement program 6 months earlier on the 19th of January, 1994. So the number 19
19, yeah.
is our lucky number. Um, and the summer, so it was July, it was incredible. Being away from, shooting and explosions. We had lived through 2 years of war in Bosnia, and we were ethnically cleansed from my home. My dad was taken to concentration camp, as were my uncles, cousins, in the
Mm.
summer of 1993. And then we lived under siege after we were ethnically cleansed from my home. We
Mm.
lived under siege in a town called Mostar. And a lot of Brits go to Mostar now. It's famous for having this old Ottoman bridge. A beautiful, beautiful little town. And we lived there, and life was incredibly difficult, surrounded by both the Bosnian Serb and the Bosnian Croat armies, bombed, shelled daily, literally starving, eating chicken feed to survive,
Mm.
grass. My mom and my auntie made pies from grass. They were incredibly
Oh,
creative
wow.
to keep us going. Um,
Wow.
and within that period, we find out that my dad was released from this concentration camp. He was released with 500 other men that had been tortured and beaten, those that had experienced the most awful things, to an island of Croatia for medical treatment. When he was there, he was told basically he can't go back to Bosnia. He can go pretty much anywhere in the world apart from the Middle East and Africa, but he can't
Mm.
go back to Bosnia because Croatia feared that these men that had experienced these awful things would go back to Bosnia. They would become soldiers and they would do,
Mm.
you know, to others what was done to them.
Mm.
So the UK was a part of this. kind of agreement, and the UK took, I think, about 37 men at that point, or 37 came to Newcastle at that point. And my dad was basically on this island for medical treatment, and then he was given a plane ticket and then landed at Stansted Airport, pointed to one room. He went into that room, and that room happened to be for Newcastle. And he was told that we would be reunited with him within 48 hours.
Wow.
That didn't happen. My dad wrote letters. I've got his handwritten letter that he wrote to
Wow.
the British government saying, "Send me back. My family's in Bosnia." And then it was just this incredible help and the support that we were given from the people of the Northeast that campaigned to bring us here. There was a lot of sympathy for what was happening in Bosnia, which I think is absolutely incredible.
Mm.
So then we eventually were tracked down in Mostar, literally given 2 hours to make a decision whether we would leave or stay. And we made this quick decision. We spent a month in a refugee camp in Croatia. I arrived in Newcastle. One of the first things I noticed was that I couldn't speak the language. I
Mm.
couldn't write. I learned, to read and write during the war. We actually went to school in the middle of the siege.
Wow.
So that was one of the first things I noticed. And I started school and I couldn't speak a word of English. And I was 9 years old in year five, and my classmates were amazing. They were incredibly welcoming. Um, my teacher was amazing. She reminded me a lot of my auntie that had just been killed, because my auntie used to sing a lot. And literally, even during the most difficult moments, she was singing and
Mm.
helping us get through the war. So Miss Webster, my teacher, was amazing, reminded me a lot of her, but I just couldn't understand what Miss Webster was saying on my classmates. And they had this song which I've been singing in my head for the last 30 years. I couldn't understand what they were singing, but I figured out that she would sing the first part on her own. She would point to someone, then the next part of the song would be sang with that person's name in it, and they would get to go home first. And naturally, everyone just loved this, and everyone was hyper every single day, and I hated it.
Mm.
And I started having separate English lessons, eventually organised by Miss Webster. And one day I come back into the classroom, everyone is like extra excited and they're all staring at me. And I'm thinking, because I'm a refugee, because I'm different, they can't say my name. They call me Smajo, Smajo, everything but Smajo. And
Mm.
that was the closest I came to running out. And Miss Webster starts playing the guitar. We're all sitting down, everyone's extra excited. And all of a sudden, I understood what they were singing, and not because I had learned English miraculously in an afternoon, but because Miss Webster had taught our entire class how to sing this song in Bosnian for me, just to make me feel welcome. And this song was about having a
Oh.
wonderful day at school, and thank you for being friends, and about friendship. And they sang it so, so badly. Honestly, it was terrible, but it was the most amazing thing I had ever heard,
Yeah.
honestly. And I just had the biggest smile on my face. And I went home,
Oh.
I smiling. I skipped home. It was the first day that I wanted to go back to school, and it was the first day that I actually felt like I belonged, that I was more than
Mm.
just a refugee. So I've had this song in my head for the last 30 years, and I've spoken about it.
Oh.
Um, but I don't know what the song is called, or
Oh.
how the full song actually goes.
Oh my gosh. I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it at this point. There's such a rich story attached to it. And it's funny, one of the questions I was actually going to ask you was, were there any moments in the UK that made settling easier as a child? And this just seems like such an embrace. Do you remember how it felt as a child, or what that shift was from how you felt before you heard people singing in your language? And of course, it was a gesture of kindness from Miss Webster. Do you remember that difference from how you felt before you heard it and how you felt after?
Yeah, because I'd go to school. Initially, no one explained to the school what I had experienced or what I had
Mm.
been through. So I'd go to school and I'd literally sit there the whole day, not doing anything. I remember one day, it was another teacher. It wasn't Miss Webster. I could tell they were all speaking about, talking about me, and she asked me to count up to 10.
Mm.
And I counted up to 10, and they were all like clapping. But I was so frustrated because I was always good at maths. And in Bosnia, we
Mm.
never used calculators or anything like that. So I was really good at the times table. And I was so frustrated. I wanted to tell them I could count up to more than just 10. But so I'd sit there with this frustration I'd sit there in my, memories and fantasies of being back in Bosnia, even though there was a war going on. I was just desperate to go back. I didn't want to be here, if I'm being honest. So I'd
Mm.
just sit there constantly thinking, okay, I'm going to run out. Okay, I'm going to walk out. I'm going to go back. And I'd just get
Mm.
lost completely in my thoughts and in my daydreams. My dad would drop me off at school in the morning, and he would always be my dad because I hadn't seen him for a year and I had missed him so much.
Mm.
And we'd stand outside the gates watching the other boys playing football, and
Mm.
I'd never go in. There'd always be like corners come in, and I never went in. I just didn't want to be there.
Mm.
Um, and then after that day, because Miss Webster, I actually met Miss Webster in 2018 completely by accident.
What?
And she was saying she just wanted to give me something familiar. And that's all it was.
Mm.
This tiny little thing, which was probably a normal day for her at school because teachers are absolutely incredible.
Mm.
And she had no idea that 30 years later I was still speaking about this. I was telling everyone, I was speaking in schools and colleges up and down the country.
Mm.
And that day was just, it was a, it was a recognition of my humanity. It
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
completely the opposite to what I had experienced in Bosnia. I was targeted because of my identity, because of my Muslim identity, because of my Bosniak
Mm.
identity. Whereas here, um, I had these complete strangers accepting me for who I am.
Mm.
And literally, it was like a switch because kids adapt to these situations differently. But
Yeah.
literally, the next day, I went in to play football with
Uh,
the boys. Like, literally, everything changed overnight, honestly.
yeah. It's the difference that being seen makes, you know. I think we've probably, like, the listeners have probably all been in situations when you feel like you're trying to communicate something and people aren't understanding you. And then one person in the group says, "Oh, actually, I get what you mean." It gives you so much confidence. It builds so much more self-esteem back into you. And I think about in the UK, so many nurses are from all around the world, and a lot of them in their home countries, they held doctor's degrees, bachelor degrees, they were teachers, they were lecturers, they were engineers. But here they've had to kind of just be one thing. And I can only imagine how frustrating that must be, you know. And I think it's so humanizing, like you said, for someone to recognize and to just make such a warm gesture. That's really beautiful. That's a really beautiful transition moment for your time in the UK. And I wonder if we could talk about what it was like actually growing up in Bosnia before coming to the UK. And you said you didn't use calculators, and I think that's the problem with like my maths. I think I grew up with calculators, and I really wish I didn't now because now I need one. But what was it like growing up as a kid in Bosnia?
Trust me, my maths is pretty horrendous now as well, considering I'm an architect and I should be better at maths. Um, Bosnia was um, Bosnia was really a beautiful, and it still is a beautiful, beautiful country. And you're right, there was a lot of frustration because there was um, kind of war-torn countries where people fleeing wars are presented as just that. If
Mm,
that makes sense, it's like as if that one snapshot is their entire lives, as if we were born to be refugees and
mm,
born constantly with that. Yes, of course, some people are born in refugee camps and have that experience, but there's also a lot of refugees that come from places where the societies and the culture are very different to here. And I always say when people ask, what can we do to safeguard what we have here in the UK? For me, is acceptance. It's accepting what happened
mm,
in Bosnia can happen here. So there was a lot of frustration um, at that time for me because I wanted to tell people what Bosnia was like, and childhood in Bosnia was incredible. We lived in the countryside. My parents had decided to start building our home around the time of the Winter Olympics. Now,
mm,
everyone always remembers the Winter Olympics, the 1984 Winter Olympics. Childhood was amazing. My family is Muslim, but
mm,
also we had Catholics, we had Orthodox Christians. We celebrated Eid at home and we had food and presents. And then Christmas, we would go to our friend's house, and Catholics have Christmas same time as we do here. Orthodox Christians have it in January.
mm,
So childhood was, absolutely incredible. It was absolutely amazing, and there wasn't these differences um, between people about ethnicities or religions or skin color, and it was beautiful. And I missed it when I came here. I didn't want to be here. We were brought here as part of this program. My dad was effectively lied to be brought here as well. He didn't want to be here. We
Mm.
tried going back to Bosnia in '97. My dad went back with my sister the first time. Our house was torched. We couldn't stay there. My mum
Uh,
and my brother and I went back in '98, and it was the same. And then we had to get on with our
mm,
lives here. But we always missed Bosnia, and there was
mm,
always this hope and dream of going back. But then life just happens. You start going to university, school, job, whatever it is, and then
a place
next
stays
thing you
you.
know, yeah, it's you're here.
Yeah, yeah. A place can really stay you. I think that's such an important story to tell, an important part of your story to tell as well, because the terms refugee and migrant, they're so loaded, and oftentimes they're weaponized, I would say. But actually it's people that have had to come somewhere. You don't flee from somewhere unless you have to. More often than not, people do want people to feel settled. More often than not, people do obligate themselves to the kindest thing. It's just not what you would see. It's not what you would
Yeah.
assume from the headlines and stuff. So it's really, really encouraging hearing that you were received by such a project to then also partake in such a project, and that it was a kindness that was extended to your family. But I also have to say well done for continuing to educate people on the genocide, because not just about the genocide itself, but also the different ways that kindness can be extended to someone, the little things that do make a difference to especially a child coming from one place to the other. And for my final question, I guess, like, taking a leaf out of the book of Miss Webster and how we speak about music, are there moments where you've really, really seen people that perhaps would be unlikely to come together, but where you've really seen something just connect a whole room or connect a whole people in such an unlikely situation?
I think music is a wonderful, wonderful unifier, and I listen to music from all parts of the world. Literally,
Mm.
I've got on my phone, I've got absolutely everything, the most random things, the most embarrassing things, some things that I'm not willing to share. But for me, if I go back selfishly to that moment, um, when my auntie was killed, one of the most courageous and the difficult things for my mom to do in that moment and my grandparents was to reject hatred. I
Mm,
literally, on the day that my mom lost her sister, she sat me, my brother and sister down to explain that actually not all Croatian people are the same. Not
mm,
all Catholics are the same. Not all Christians are the same. That we can't generalize, we can't hate, and that we're all individuals. For me, that was just the start. It wasn't just that conversation. It was many conversations from my parents and grandparents. And I've been so blessed to have grandparents and parents like that freed me of that hatred. And I
mm,
often think when I see some of the hateful and awful things being written now about people that, um, especially on social media, that, they've never met, they've never known, they
mm.
can't pronounce their names. And I just feel like there's no excuse. So
Yeah.
I've been brought up with that. And then that that kind of faith in humanity for me was confirmed self. And again, if I can go back to that moment selfishly, to that moment when my classmates sang this, because I've
Mm,
thought about that moment so many times over the years, because
mm.
Bosnian is a very difficult language. And I
Right.
can imagine how much they struggled with it. Some of those classmates are still my best mates. And I can imagine how
Ah.
much they struggled, pronouncing these weird Bosnian words. And
Mm.
but I remember that day, like I remember how excited they all were. Like it's weird. I remember
Ah.
sitting down. I feel like um I'm actually going back to that school in a couple of weeks' time, hopefully with Miss Webster.
Wow.
But I remember exactly where I was sitting. It's such a vivid moment. Like I
Mm.
remember where I was sitting. I remember all these faces looking at me and just like this desire to sing this for me.
Yeah.
Like it was just honestly, it was incredible. Like and I always make the point that they sang it so badly, and they were encouraging me to sing. And I don't think that at times I couldn't. I was struggling to understand it, and they got better. But it was such a beautiful thing. And honestly, I um I hum that tune so often, and I find
Mm.
in moments, if I'm having a bad day, I'll sing it to myself. It's weird, but
Mm.
it's just that energy. Like the whole class. everyone there, like just wanting to do that for me. And
Yeah.
like it was, as I said, it was just a normal day for Miss Webster. It would be a normal, probably a fun afternoon for them rehearsing in between when I wasn't there. But for me, like through that song, they completely changed my life. Like I can
Yeah.
literally go back. I feel like that moment is the start. So the moment when
Mm,
my auntie died, my mum freed me of that hatred and changed my life. And then
mm,
coming to the UK when I was depressed, when I had fantasies of running away and going back home to Bosnia, they just helped me settle. They gave me back my humanity, my dignity, and that's the power of music, and that's why I
yeah.
love listening to music that I can't necessarily understand sometimes. Um, but yeah, that's what they did for me that day, and genuinely,
Yeah.
I'll forever be grateful. And I think it's a huge part of the reason why I do this work now.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, God bless Miss Webster. I wonder if she knew at the time the impact it would have. So we're speaking about hope hits. We're speaking about songs that make us feel maybe inspired, motivated, reflective, as well as the song that Miss Webster had the whole class sing to you growing up. Is there another song that our listeners could also listen to that inspire those same feelings?
There is another song, and it's a song which um, it's a song that was actually very important to my grandmother. She constantly reminded us of our values, of our beliefs, of our humanity, when it was probably the most difficult thing that she could have done because it could have been so easy for my mom and my
Mm,
grandmother to turn to hatred. And I think when you're in a situation like that, when we're living under siege, it was January of 1994, starving, running out of the awful chicken feed. My dad, we didn't know that my dad had made his way to the UK by that point. We hadn't seen most of our other male relatives for months. The easiest and the most soothing thing, and I always make this point for my mom and my grandmother to do in that moment, would have been to tell us to hate. Like that would have
mm,
been the easiest and the most soothing thing to do. And they did, the most courageous, the most incredible, for me, the most amazing example of people choosing compassion over hatred.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and my grandmother passed away a few years ago, and
mm,
her pain could have easily turned to anger and extremism, and it could have affected us. It could have affected
mm,
my outlook on life. And I'm so blessed to have had them in my life because she lived the remainder of her life in Mostar. Even right up until, her death, she always reminded us of what was important to us.
mm,
So she was amazing. And she had this one song. Um, it was a song by a singer from Mostar. And I'm not sure why she liked it. It was weird. We never, but she loved it. It's a song about Mostar. It's
mm.
a singer called Adnan Jakupovic, and the
Okay.
song is called Mostarska. So it's a song about Mostar. It's about taking someone to Mostar, and you will see how you will fall in love with it. And it
Mm.
describes it. Um, it's a beautiful, beautiful song. Um, but for my grandmother, I'm not sure why, but every time he would come on the radio and TV, she would always turn it up. She never
Mm.
really liked listening to music that much, but there was one or two singers and songs that she liked. But she would always turn it on,
Mm.
and that song in particular. So yeah, so that's a song that has a lot of meaning for me and my family, and yeah, it's a song um, that I reference when I'm having a difficult day, I think. And although
Mm.
it's so loaded, it's got so much emotion. It's a song that always kind of brings me back to life somehow. So yeah, so that's the song that I would recommend.
Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing, and we will all think of your grandma as we listen to it as well. So thank you. Smile, thank you so much for sharing your story, for continuing to share your story and inform people of what really happens and what also really makes a difference. Honestly, thank you so much. I've learned so much. I know the listeners are going to learn so much from listening back to this as well. So thank you so much for your time today. Listeners, you can actually nominate your own hope hits, and all of these songs of hope will be added to our Hope on Repeat playlist. Alongside voting, you can actually also find more stories, more music, and more of the work that we are doing to support displaced people all around the world at unrefugees.org.uk. Thank you all so much for listening. My name is Sophia Thakur. I'm a poet, and we'll catch up soon. But until then, keep hope on repeat.